Everyone feared the giant alien warrior until a human pinned her down. The arena of Valos hummed with the sound of 10,000 alien heartbeats, all synchronized in a rhythm of bloodthirsty anticipation. At the center of the dust-choked circle stood Vaylin, a titan of bronze skin and iridescent markings that glowed with a predatory violet light. She was 7 feet of lethal elegance, her muscles rippling like coiled serpents under the weight of her ceremonial armor. No one in the hegemony had lasted more than a minute against her, yet the human representative stood across from her with nothing but a pair of combat trousers and a look of terrifying focus. Wilder was smaller, certainly, but his frame was dense with a different kind of power, a symmetry of muscle honed by gravity much harsher than this world. The crowd mocked him, their chirps and whistles filling the air with derision for the soft-skinned Terran. Vaylin bared her teeth, a gesture that was half threat and half promise. "You should have stayed on your ship, little human," she rumbled. The sound of her voice was like tectonic plates grinding together, deep and resonant. Wilder didn't respond with words, instead shifting his weight and narrowing his eyes. He moved with a fluidity that confused the Vorlax spectators, his center of gravity low and his hands held open. "I am here to finish this," Wilder said. The silence that followed his voice was heavier than the noise that preceded it. Vaylin lunged, a blur of violet light and speed that should have ended the match instantly. She swung a massive fist that could shatter stone, but the human wasn't there. He moved like smoke, sliding under her guard with a speed that made the Vorlax nobles gasp. Vaylin spun, her long tail whipping through the air to catch him, but Wilder caught the limb instead. He used the momentum of her own massive body against her, a concept foreign to a species that relied on sheer force. The warrior queen felt a sudden, sickening shift in her equilibrium as the human stepped into her personal space. His chest pressed against her midriff, the heat of his skin searing through her thin tunic. It wasn't the heat of a fire but the furnace-like warmth of a human body at peak exertion. She tried to shove him back, but Wilder's hands were like iron clamps on her shoulders. He pivoted his hips, dropping his weight in a manner that felt like a mountain collapsing onto her. "What is this?" she gasped. The air left her lungs as she felt herself being lifted off the ground. For the first time in her life, Vaylin was airborne without her own consent. The world tilted as Wilder executed a perfect suplex, slamming her massive frame into the dirt with a force that shook the spectator stands. The dust cloud rose, obscuring the view for a heartbeat, but when it settled, the screaming crowd went deathly silent. Vaylin was flat on her back, her eyes wide with shock and a strange, budding heat. Wilder was on top of her, his legs woven between hers in a restrictive grapevine, his forearms pressing into her throat just enough to command respect. He had her pinned, his smaller frame effectively neutralizing her superior reach. Their faces were inches apart and the scent of salt and musk from his skin filled her senses. Vaylin's iridescent markings pulsed a deep, frantic crimson. "Do you yield?" Wilder whispered, his breath fanned across her lips, making her core ache with a sudden, violent longing. She looked up into his eyes and saw a predatory fire that matched her own. "Never," she breathed, but her hands didn't reach for his throat to kill. They gripped his biceps, feeling the hard, vibrating tension of his muscles. The human didn't let go, instead leaning down to press his forehead against hers. The dominance was total, and to the Vorlax it was the most shocking display of prowess they had ever witnessed. The twist came not from the fight but from the silence of the elders. Zayden, the human commander watching from the observation deck, stepped forward and signaled for the end of the trial. He knew what the crowd did not yet realize. This wasn't just a duel for diplomatic standing, it was the rite of Kavath, an ancient Vorlax tradition where the victor claimed the right to the loser's house and heart. By pinning Vaylin, Wilder hadn't just won a fight, he had legally and culturally claimed the most powerful woman in the sector. "The human has succeeded," Zayden announced. His voice echoed through the speakers, signaling a shift in galactic history. Vaylin looked at Wilder, her chest heaving as she tried to reconcile her defeat with the electricity surging through her nerves. "You knew," she accused. Her voice was a low growl, but the edges were soft, frayed by the physical proximity of the man who had humbled her. "I knew I had to win," Wilder replied. He finally released her, standing up and offering a hand to the fallen queen. She took it, allowing him to pull her to her feet, feeling the rough calluses of his palm against her smoother skin. The crowd began to murmur, the realization of what had occurred spreading like wildfire through the arena. The transition from the dusty arena to the private sanctum of the Queen's palace was a blur of protocol and hushed whispers. Once the heavy doors clicked shut, the political weight of the moment evaporated, leaving only the raw, unfinished business between a man and a woman. The room was draped in silks and smelled of rare resins, but Wilder only had eyes for Vaylin. She had shed her armor, standing in a translucent shift that highlighted the staggering beauty of her alien anatomy. She was a giant, yes, but in the dim light, she looked like a goddess carved from starlight and obsidian. "You humiliated me," she said. She walked toward him, her height requiring her to look down at him, yet he did not recoil. He stood his ground, his gaze roaming over her with a hunger that made her skin itch. "I showed you that strength isn't just about size," Wilder countered. He stepped into her space again, closing the gap until his human warmth was a physical presence against her cooler skin. "Then show me the rest of this human strength," she challenged. She reached out, her long fingers tracing the line of his jaw before sliding down to the pulse point at his neck. It was racing, a frantic thrumming that told her he was just as affected as she was. He didn't hesitate, his hands finding her waist and pulling her flush against him. The contrast was breathtaking. The intimacy that followed was a battle of its own, a sensual exploration where Wilder's human endurance met Vaylin's alien intensity. He moved with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, guiding her body with the same leverage and control he had used in the arena. Every touch was calculated to provoke a reaction, his mouth finding the sensitive junction of her neck and shoulder. Vaylin arched her back, a low, melodic purr escaping her throat as she felt the friction of his skin. "You are so small yet so heavy," she whispered. Her hands wandered over the broad expanse of his shoulders, marveling at the density of his frame. He was a compact powerhouse, a testament to humanity's evolution on a high-gravity world. "Gravity made us tough, Vaylin," he muttered. He pressed her back onto the massive bed, his body a solid weight that she welcomed. The suggestive nature of their union was not lost on her. She had spent her life as the predator, the one who took what she wanted. Now she was finding a different kind of power in surrender. He pinned her wrists above her head, not with malice but with a firm, possessive hold that ignited a fire in her belly. "I could snap you," she teased. Her eyes were glowing bright violet, her markings strobing in time with her quickening breath. "You could try," Wilder said. He lowered his head, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both a claim and a question. It was the first time she had tasted a human, and he tasted of salt, iron, and an unyielding will. Their moment of peace was shattered by the sound of an explosion echoing through the palace walls. The sensors in the room wailed, a shrill, piercing sound that signaled an assassination attempt. Tala, a rival from a lesser Vorlax house who had long coveted Vaylin's throne, had seen the human victory as a moment of weakness to exploit. "They are in the halls," Vaylin said. She was on her feet in an instant, her warrior instincts overriding the haze of pleasure. She reached for her ceremonial blade, but Wilder was already moving toward the door, his eyes scanning the room for tactical advantages. "Stay behind me," he ordered. It was an absurd request given her size and training, but there was a command in his voice that she found herself obeying. He didn't have a sword, but he had a small, high-frequency pulse pistol hidden in his discarded trousers. "They have shields, Wilder," she warned. The door hissed open, revealing 3 Vorlax assassins clad in heavy plating, their energy blades humming. Vaylin lunged forward, but Wilder grabbed her arm, pulling her back into the cover of the doorway. "Not with force, Vaylin. Use the environment," he said. He fired a precise shot not at the assassins but at the overhead fire suppression pipes. A cloud of supercooled gas hissed out, obscuring the vision of the attackers and shorting out their electronic shields. Wilder moved through the fog like a ghost. He didn't try to trade blows with the larger warriors. Instead, he used his size to his advantage, staying low and striking at their joints. He used the same grappling techniques from the arena, taking out the lead assassin's knee with a brutal kick before spinning him into his comrade. Vaylin watched in awe as the human dismantled a superior force with sheer ingenuity and economy of motion. When the fog cleared, the 3 assassins were on the floor, unconscious or incapacitated. "Humanity doesn't just fight the enemy," Wilder said. He was breathing hard, his skin glistening with a mixture of sweat and the residue of the gas. He looked at Vaylin, his expression softening as he checked her for injuries. "We changed the rules of the game," he added. Vaylin stepped over the fallen bodies, her heart swelling with a pride she hadn't known she could feel for another species. She realized then that the hegemony had been wrong about Terrans. They weren't just diplomats, they were the most dangerous predators in the stars because they knew how to win when they were outmatched. The aftermath of the attack solidified their bond. Tala's coup failed as word spread of how the human consort had protected the queen. The political landscape of the galaxy shifted overnight. Humans were no longer seen as a minor species to be tolerated, but as a vital, formidable partner. In the quiet of the dawn, Wilder and Vaylin stood on the balcony of her palace, looking out over the sprawling city of Valos. "My people will never look at a human the same way again," Vaylin said. She leaned against the railing, her shoulder brushing his. The height difference was still there, but the power dynamic had reached a perfect, vibrating equilibrium. "And how do you look at me?" Wilder asked. He turned to her, his hand finding the small of her back. The touch was familiar now, a silent language they had developed in the heat of the night. "I look at you as my equal," she replied. She smiled, a rare and beautiful expression that made her violet markings shimmer with gold. "And as the man who pinned the queen," she added, her voice was thick with a suggestive promise of what the next night would bring. Wilder pulled her closer, his gaze sweeping over the horizon. He knew the challenges ahead, the treaties to sign, the enemies to watch, but with Vaylin at his side he felt like he could hold back the stars themselves. The union of Wilder and Vaylin became the stuff of legend, a story told in every starport from Earth to the Vorlax core. It was the moment humanity proved that excellence wasn't measured in meters or megatons, but in the ability to adapt, to endure, and to love with an intensity that could bridge any void. The giant alien warrior had been feared by all, but it was a human who had found the strength to hold her, and in doing so had secured the future of both their worlds. As they stood together, the sons of Valos rose, casting a long, joined shadow across the balcony, a single silhouette of two souls made one by a contest of wills. "Shall we go back inside?" Wilder suggested. His eyes were dark with a renewed hunger, his hand sliding lower to pull her hips toward his. "Yes," Vaylin whispered. She didn't lead him this time. They walked together, step for step, into the warmth of the palace. The doors closed, shutting out the rest of the galaxy, leaving only the heat, the touch, and the undeniable truth of human ingenuity.